That's awesome. I probably saw him for 6 years running.
Congratulations to each and every one of the successful applicants. And this is going to be a very interesting hunt, I think, given the weather conditions out there. You didn't have to travel all the way to Colorado to hunt elk and snow, but you know, I think it'll be an interesting experience. So we'll start with Brian Masterbrook. Thank you.
First of all, you're pretty lucky to be here. 47,000 or 48,000 applicants, and you were drawn from among them. You know, there are 330 hunters total this year. This is a lot of people in here, but we've had more. We had 410 one year. So this is like one of the second biggest classes. Many of you know that if you got an antlerless permit, you're ineligible for another 10 years. If you have any elk permit, this is it. This is your chance to hunt elk in Michigan. You're done after this. Michigan elk history, I'm going to go back a little bit. Michigan elk were made native to Michigan, although probably not very frequently in this part of Michigan. They were extirpated as the land was settled in 1877, I think was the last recorded elk killed in Michigan. And then they started releasing animals. 1910 to 1920, there was kind of a big conservation movement across the country, and animals were being released in a number of places. In 1918, 7 animals were released, and those animals took and became our herd today. There are rumors of other animals being put in the herd by private individuals, but none of those are ever confirmed. So what we have grew from 8 animals from 1918. Now those animals were dropped off in a landscape much different than this one. It was a logged, burnt over landscape. There were probably no tall trees. It was grassy fields and shrubs, and that is great country for elk. They're an open range animal. They do very well. They prefer to browse grasses or graze rather than browse trees. They do both, but they took some time to get going. Early surveys in the 20s showed 15 animals and 16, then we kind of lost track of them, and through World War II no one paid much attention because they were doing other things. But as the numbers increased, the habitat kind of got worse. The habitat started declining because the trees grew up and out of sight, or out of where the animals could get them. So by the mid-60s, it was estimated that there were around 1,500 animals. The range was declining. They were starting to move out of the Pigeon River country where they were initially released and be problems in agricultural areas. And they had a hunt. They had a hunt in 64 and 65. And those 2 hunts killed 452 elk. Now after that, the population was declining and continued to decline. There was a lot of poaching back then, and they were down to about 200 animals in 1972, less than 200 animals in a survey in 72. At that time, the department made a decision, probably with some local input, to keep elk in Michigan. These were, this was a big decision. These were animals that were put here. They weren't native to up here. But the decision was made to keep them here. And when they made that decision, we started working on a management plan, formulated a management plan with goals of 800 to 900 elk. And with the idea, the main goal for this herd was to have a herd that offers optimal viewer recreation with the population controlled by hunting. So those two things, go together. The hunters are important to keep the population in check, but the main thing is to have a viewing population, and that's why you have about 1/3 of the permits be bull permits and 2/3 cow permits. We've got probably the highest ratio of bulls to cows in this herd, perhaps anywhere in the country, certainly more than in the western herds where they hammer the bulls pretty hard. And a lot of the eastern herds, they're starting to follow our model here, but this is really something extraordinary. If you're here in the fall, your chance of hearing a bull and seeing a big bull is much greater than probably anywhere else. We reached the population goal. It went from 200 in 1972 up to about 850 in 1984, and that's when they held the first modern elk hunt. This year, then, is the 25th consecutive year of elk hunting since 1984. 5,432 licenses have been issued, and we've killed 4,600 elk. So that's about 4 times what we've got in the herd right now. So that's a pretty neat thing, and we hope to keep going this way. A lot of people benefit from this. Talked about the numbers a little bit. We started a new survey 3 years ago. In the first year we did it, we got 980 animals, I think, 930, and we said, perfect, you know, that's just exactly what we thought. And the next year they did it and we got 1,200. And you couldn't have shot the number of animals we had and had them grow and got 1,200 unless you brought them in train cars somehow. And we knew no one had done that, so we had to adjust kind of our population, what we thought was out there. And we did another survey and we got another high population number. And that's why we went from 168 licenses last year to 330 this year. Because we've got that population now that we think is higher than we initially thought, and we're trying to take it down to back where we want it to be. It does not affect amount, but we do pull a tooth. We'll also give you a field age. We'll look at the teeth in the back. We can cut the jaw if you want, if you're not going to get it mounted, or we'll just look. If you're going to get it mounted, we'll give you an estimate of how the age. And we're pretty good up to about 5 years old. Beyond that, it gets a little harder.
Michigan's elk herd is a wonderful resource that we're fortunate enough to have in this area. As conservation officers, we aim to do everything in our ability to protect it. However, we can't do this alone. We do need your help, and we appreciate your help. Poachers are thieves. They steal from everyone. Set of antlers I have over here, if you bear with me with the screeching. Who would call this a shooter elk?
Yeah, I'd call it shooter.
This set right here was stolen from you hunters last firearm deer season in 2007. Okay? This one was shot by a deer hunter.
That's a good one.
Thought it was the biggest buck he'd ever seen. He was a little mistaken.
Okay. With the help of ethical, responsible sportsmen, we're actually able to catch the individuals who shot that animal. After about 50 yards, you see a herd of a bunch of elk. You have a cow tag, and again, like I say, a once in a lifetime draw. Buck fever is multiplied by about 10. Your heart's pumping. Okay. Raise up your gun. You aim. Pull the trigger. Elk doesn't react. And all of a sudden, with the commotion, all the elk start moving again and moving around. And you're like, well, there's the one I shot. And bang. Oh, didn't fall again. Bang. Didn't fall again. Bang. Okay. Smoke finally clears. You got 3 dead elk laying at your feet. Now you laugh. The record's 4. So please don't let that happen.
Hi, I'm Tom Cooley. I'm in the Wildlife Disease Laboratory down in East Lansing. And I got a series of slides, and we're going to show you some basic elk anatomy, hopefully where to put a killing shot on an animal, what to do once you've got the animal down, procedures that you should follow once you get to the check station, and then because you've been drawn, you have become active participants with us in our bovine tuberculosis and chronic wasting disease surveillance program. And so I'll go through those procedures with you as well. This is a yearling bull that we had come down to our laboratory, and what we're going to do is take him apart layer by layer and give you an idea of where you want to place that killing shot. And of course, again, the heart and lung area is the area that you want to aim for. We've taken the skin off the animal, and now the muscle off the front leg and the chest so that you can see the ribs exposed there. There's the shoulder blade or scapula, the humerus, the large upper bone in the front leg. Now with the ribs removed, the heart is lying right here. Again, here's your front leg, Heart is right here, surrounded by the lungs. Diaphragm is right here. The liver lies just on the backside of the diaphragm. You want to shoot here, you don't want to shoot here. That, of course, is the rumen in the intestinal tract. If you gut shoot one of these animals, it's not going to be pleasant for that animal. In this picture, we've taken the ribs and the stomachs off, or the lungs and the stomachs off, I'm sorry, and there you can see the heart in association with the front leg. The diaphragm is right here, and there lies the liver. So on an animal standing broadside to you, your shot's going to be right in here. If you're a little forward, you're going to be hitting that shoulder area. A little high, you'll be in the back. And if you're back a little bit, you'll be into the liver. But again, it's that heart lung shot that you want to try to take.
These animals right now we're past the rut. There are some groups where there's a big bull with a bunch of cows and calves, and there's maybe a spike bull or a raghorn, a 4x4 or so in the group. There are other groups where they're just cows and calves and spikes and other little bulls. Anytime you got a group of probably 10 or more, 8 or 10, it's going to be cows and calves with perhaps a spike mixed in there. So that's why Joe talked to you about that, Tom talked about that. We see it happen every year. That's why we all talk about it. You really got to look at those animals. Make sure you know what you're shooting at when you pull the trigger. The bulls, especially the big bulls, isolate themselves into bachelor groups and go off usually into thicker cover. The bigger the bull, it seems, the thicker the cover. And there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 of them together, sometimes a few more, but usually it's singles or up to 4 animals will be a bull. So if you come across a single track or 2 tracks, it could be bulls crossing the road. That being said, animals aren't crossing the road very much. They just got through the firearm deer season where they were bumped around, pushed around, moved around by people, and now they're probably sticking pretty tight and they're not moving very much. They're at some place where they can eat. They're in a clear cut. Not so much our grassy openings anymore, although they may be pawing down to some of our managed openings, but they're in a clear cut usually near a swamp, and they're feeding right there and then going into the swamp in the evening perhaps for cover, or else laying out in the middle of the field. One night I followed elk stands out. It was like between 30 and 40 below, and I was on a snowmobile because someone else had the truck that night, and I followed this one elk, and it was with a group, and they bedded down in the opening. It was 35 or 40 below. I could barely keep warm. I had a fire going. I was going to start the snowmobile on fire to keep warm, but I couldn't. And what they were doing was they were laying there chewing their cud, which for them is a exercise or energetic process that keeps them warm. But they had their legs tucked in, and being out in that 30 to 40 below really doesn't affect those animals. So this cold and this much snow isn't going to change their behavior at all. But their main concern is finding something to eat. There's about 1,000 animals, a few more than 1,000 animals. They're over about 1,000 square miles. But with them being grouped up, there's a lot of empty miles out there. If you see tracks or have seen tracks, I would work that area. I would start doing blinds. If you see tracks cross a road, you're lucky. But what I would do is try and get in a good spot and just walk a straight line out, walk a straight line north, and then a straight line back, or whichever way, put a grid out there and try and cross some tracks. If you cross some tracks, those animals are probably close. They're probably within 40 acres, or maybe even 80, unless they've been bumped by someone else and are moving somewhere else, they're going to be staying close. So finding that initial set of tracks is what you need to do. If you find tracks and you start hunting them, you're tracking along, move along, look right, look left, because they love to do button hooks. They love to turn and look back, and they'll do that constantly, continuously, and they'll turn and then move forward. They'll turn and move forward. And it depends on how they're following the terrain and where they're going and stuff like that, but those animals do that repeatedly. And if you're tracking an animal, be on the watch for that. If you're tracking an animal and bump them, they're probably not going to go a long ways the first time. And if that happens, make sure you're downwind. Try and move up on them again. Probably I'd go off at right angles to where I saw them and then move forward. But you can bump them once and maybe get back in sight of them. If you bump them twice, you're in for a long chase. They're probably going to move quite a ways. And this is in general. You know, every animal and set of animals is different. The herd moves slower than the individual initially, but once it gets going, it goes farther. So just be aware of that. Tom mentioned there are collars out there. You know,